Good afternoon and welcome to the December 3rd, 2021 version of News from the Front Lines of Business, where we help you know your numbers so that you can grow your numbers. This week's episode will talk about a couple planning opportunities for year end, and once again, we're going to emphasize that if you see something here that you may be able to benefit from, please reach out for more information, and don't take any of this information to be a specific recommendation to you. Okay, so here we are. We've made it through another week, and we're going to talk about some numbers and current events. But first, we're going to have a little bit of fun with numbers. And this week's number 1536, 1536, and what that represents is the number of dollars an average American household is going to spend this year on Christmas-related presents. So you see my picture there of Krampus, who's kind of like the anti-Santa Claus, and if the kids are bad, instead of just not getting a present, they get hauled off some prison camp in Central Europe, as the legend goes. But anyway, I just I guess the meaning of the holiday of the Christmas season seems to really have been lost on a lot of us, and just spending the money and the hardship that places on families' finances is very real. And every time I look at this and the time of year, it kind of makes me just think back on how it's, wish we could go back to a smaller scale, version of things, and kind of get in touch with the meaning of the season. But anyway, you'll see Krampus stuff all over the place at my office. So news from the front. So we're getting closer to year end here. So now we're into December, and a few things going on. The Build Back Better Act is still in its final stages, and a few other year-end planning things to talk about. But first, we'll take a look at cost of living well index. So, as everybody I'm sure is noticing lately, prices are high across the board and everything. You'll notice that restaurants, the paper goods and everything else like that is increasing, and now even locally you're starting to see where these business owners are increasing the cost and everything that we need to pay. So this chart here highlights, I guess, another part of the kind of inequity, and shows the cost of living well index. So this is a screenshot here from a Jason Hartman podcast earlier this week, so it's a little bit blurry, but we have these three lines. Green represents net worth of your ultra wealthy people in the U.S. So we can see going back to 85 how it's increased exponentially. It's really gone up quite a bit. And when you compare that to inflation, these two solid color lines below it, the gray line at the bottom is the regular consumer price index inflation. The darker line is the living well index. What that represents is things like caviar, luxury cars, and things that the higher net worth people would typically buy. So those things have inflated at a somewhat higher rate than the general basket of goods, which general price index would contain things like groceries, gasoline, utilities, things that everybody has to pay, and so we see those are definitely going up, and we don't like inflation as a general rule, but the living well index has gone up, higher than the general index, but nowhere near in proportion to the amount of wealth that has been gained due to these people and the type of investments that these high net worth people would typically have. So because they're invested more in real estate and a lot of more, income producing properties, their net worth has increased, exponentially compared to just what you would expect from regular price inflation. So this kind of once again shows you how choosing the assets you invest in is important to maintaining your net worth, because if you're looking at passbook accounts and things that throw off very low rates of interest, if you had nothing but that, you would be right along that same line with that inflation index, or possibly most likely lower, and would have definitely your net worth would have been a negative slope on this graph. So invest in real assets is the takeaway there. A deadline that's coming up, if this Build Back Better Act passes, which most are expecting it to, the Backdoor Roth IRA is going to be going away. And just to show you where that comes from, excuse me for this messed up text here, but if you can't contribute to a Roth, so in most cases this will be somebody who earns above the income level. So if in 2021, if you made between 198,000 and 207, you can't contribute anything to a Roth, and it goes up for next year. So because they take away this contribution, with one of the strategies is to do the backdoor Roth, because excuse me, conversions are still allowed. So you can contribute to a non-deductible IRA, deductible IRAs, and etc. Convert those things over to Roth IRAs and kind of backdoor your way in it. And similar strategy takes place on the 401k side. So because this Build Back Better Act is going to kind of outlaw this, if you're considering any kind of conversion, that needs to be done before December 31st, because our deadline is sneaking up on us and we're expecting that thing to pass, and they're not going to give us a lot of time to deal with it. It's pretty much going to be effective 1/1 of 2022. So backdoor conversions need to happen quickly. Another discussion we had with a client recently, he's talking about year-end planning and prepaying expenses and things of that nature, and he threw out the idea that he was going to go and buy some inventory because he had some production coming up next year, and his idea was to go ahead and prepay inventory. Well, we'll just mention here, and as a reminder, that prepaying expenses will save you tax. Pre-purchasing inventory doesn't, because inventory is basically another asset. So keep that in mind as you're doing your year-end spending. Inventory is no good; it's a no-no. But you can prepay some other bills, rent and things like that. You are allowed to do that for things that are going to be spent in the next year. So you can't get too crazy with it, but you can prepay some next year's expenses. So that's really it. I guess I'll back up 1 second. So, and additionally, before talking about my closing thoughts here, the Roth IRA strategy. So this vacation home strategy. This is another conversation we had with a client. Because we talked a little bit about self-directed IRAs and the ways that you can buy property in your IRA. So assuming the IRA has enough funds to buy a rental vacation property somewhere, assuming it has enough money in it to do the down payment, one guy threw out the strategy, well, what if I put the down payment and I finance it with a qualified type of loan and started renting it out? What happens when the thing's paid off? Well, it's tax-free, so that's a great strategy for acquiring properties and places you may want to go to upon retirement and things like that. Because remember, most of these real estate, depending on the type of the property it is, these non-recourse type loans will lend you usually around 60% of the value. So if you have a decent amount of cash accumulated within your Roth, non-recourse loan the difference and start renting it out. And as the rent comes in and pays down a loan, at some point you're going to end up with a paid off property, strictly from the tenants paying it off. And when you take that property out of the Roth, completely tax free. So none of the gains you're taxed on, you're not taxing any of the rental income along the way. And that's a good way to accumulate a vacation property somewhere. So that was a thought that I wanted to share with y'all. But anyway, closing thoughts here. So, I've been studying the Stoic philosophers and spent a little time, reading over the break and everything. But the thought for this week is that we don't really own anything, merely hold it in trust. So this is a work from Ryan Holiday, and he quotes another author here. There's poetry here, and it basically goes back to recap of how when you get to the end of your life and look back on all the stuff you've accumulated. It's just stuff, right? So you're going to go on to the next world at some point, and all that stuff stays here. So even your life, your reputation, everything is something that's just really passing. It comes in passing. You're just kind of in charge of it in trust, for now. But at some point, it's going to revert to some other owner, right? It's all kind of a loan. People die, they say. So I guess it's just kind of once again reiterates the fact of focusing on living the good life now. Don't take things for granted. Don't worry too much about things that are in your control, that out of your control. Control what you can, and don't worry about the rest. And just live the good life here, and don't get too I guess hung up on possessions, because at the end of the day, you really don't own anything anyway. You come in this world with nothing, you leave with nothing. So a good thought. But Ryan Holiday, he does a pretty good job of dissecting some of the Stoic philosophies, and that's something that jumped out at me this week. So with that, enjoy some of this, at least down here in South Louisiana, 75-degree weather with no rain or humidity on the horizon here. So enjoy your weekend, and we'll see you next week.